Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our closing procedures class. I want to welcome all of you from Elite Ocean View Realty. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to go over all the procedures we take as realtors as we get ready to close on a sale of a property. Whether you are representing the seller and buyer, uh, both procedures apply to both, right? So if you have any questions throughout our trainings, please feel free and ask questions. We are going to be reviewing several documents inside of Form Simplicity. We're also going to be reviewing the closing disclosure. We're going to be reviewing the HUD statement, which is the closing statement. And we're going to review our disbursement form, make sure that you guys are properly filling out a disbursement form and a walkthrough inspection form. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now that you are under contract, of course, there are things that we do in order to move along in our process of the sale. And the first step, of course, is going to be to order an inspection on the property. Now, we do have, classes on the inspection process and what to look out for during the inspection of a property, how to order an inspection, and when the inspection should be ordered. Um, so we've ordered the inspection of the property. It the inspection was performed. Maybe the price was negotiated, maybe a seller credit was negotiated, and then you move on. The lender at this point, if there is a lender, should be working on the loan application and they should be ordering an appraisal if an appraisal is going to be ordered. The appraisal is going to be ordered, it's going to be performed, and then there's a value to the property, a price that's going to be delivered. So once we've passed all of this, then we start preparing for closing. Of course, the buyer needs to contact an insurance company and they need to secure an insurance binder, an insurance policy for the property, and a binder will be sent over to the lenders so the lenders can go ahead and they can go ahead and approve the policy, right? The insurance policy. All right. So all of that has taken place, and now we are getting very, very close to the closing date. Now, there is a loan approval period, usually that is within 30 days of the effective date of the contract. I am going to open over here in the blank forms. I'm going to open up the purchase contract, and I want you guys to see it and make sure that when you are following through that you know your deadlines, important deadlines when closing on a property. All right, so we talked about the inspection period, right? The inspection period, if you go to page number 5 of your contract, of your purchase contract, you will see right here that there is an inspection period, and you're going to place a number here, which is how many days you have to perform the inspection and when the inspection period is going to expire. Normally, you're going to put between 7 to 10 days. The most that you're going to put is 15 days. If you leave it blank, some agents want to take longer for an inspection period. If the seller allows you to take longer, then you can place whatever number here. So normally it's going to be between 7 and 10 days. That's going to be your first deadline. Actually, your first deadline will be the deposit, right? The deposit and escrow, which is on page number 1. But your second deadline is most definitely going to be your inspection period. All right. If you go all the way here to the top, first page of your contract, you will see that the initial deposit is to be made. And if you leave it in blank, it says within 3 days after the effective date. So if the contract is executed today, Tuesday, the 7th of October, then we start counting tomorrow. Wednesday, the 8th, Thursday, the 9th, Friday, the 10th. So the initial deposit, whatever the deposit is going to be made in escrow to the title company, should be made within 3 days, which will be Friday. That's your first deadline. Your second deadline is going to be your inspection period. And then, of course, you must perform the inspection during that inspection period and decide whether you're going to move forward with the contract or not. All right. So then the next deadline that deadline that you should worry about is going to be the loan approval period. So under financing, and if you check B for financing, this contract is contingent upon and then blank within 30 days if you leave it in blank, the loan approval period. So if you are approaching the 30th day that you are under contract and you still do not have a loan approval from the lenders, then you must write up an addendum asking for an extension to the loan approval period. So you need to speak and you need to be in constant communication with the lender. And when I mean you are the buyer agent. You and your buyer must be communicating with the lender and see how much more time do they need to approve this loan, right? If the loan is approved, then you do not need to ask for an extension. But if you are getting close to that 30-day period and you still do not have uh, a loan approval because maybe there are some conditions to the approval that have not been met yet, or there's issues that are, arising at that moment, and they're asking for another 7 days, then you want to go ahead and write an addendum. So that is your next timeline here, deadline, which is a 30-day loan approval period. All right, guys, this is why it's very important when we go out with buyers that we do have the buyers already pre-approved with a lender. So the moment we choose a property, they can start the loan process right away. All right, so I just really wanted to show that to you inside of the contract. And then what document do we use in order to extend a loan approval period or maybe extend a closing date? And that's going to be a simple addendum to a contract. So when you open up over here in Form Simplicity, the addendum to a contract, you are going to write the number of addendum that this is. So if this is your first addendum, then you're going to write one. If this is your third addendum, then you're going to write number three. And then you're going to write the effective date. So the date that the contract was signed, you're going to write it here. And then, of course, who's the seller, who's the buyer, then the property address, and then your extension is going to be written here. So how do you write an extension? Seller and buyer agree to extend loan approval period till October 15th, 2025. Or the closing date. If for some reason you guys need to extend closing, because we're not clear to close yet, but we have indications that we should be clear to close by the 15th of October. Then you're going to write seller and buyer agree to extend closing date until October 15th, 2025. And you're always going to write at the end, all other terms and conditions of this contract remain the same, basically closing out your addendum correctly. All right. And then, of course, you need this addendum signed by both the buyer and the seller. Once you do so, you want to submit it over to the title company so the title company knows that the new closing date is October 15th. All right. This is the addendum or the form that you will use to extend loan approval period or closing date. You also will use this form for any additional terms added to the purchase contract. So if there is a seller credit, right? If the seller is going to credit the buyer with $5,000 at closing, then using this addendum, you're going to write seller will credit $5,000 to buyer at closing, right? It could be for repairs. It could be to replace an air conditioner. It could be just a normal. They decided they want to give credit to the buyer. All right. So we're going to be using this addendum quite a bit. Guys, get used to it. Just make sure that you know how to find the addendum, which is real simple. It's inside of Form Simplicity in your blank forms. You'll find it. It's in alphabetical order. Once you open up your blank forms, it's actually the first one. All right. Any questions on addendums, extending closing date, extending loan approval period? We just need to make sure we are now clear to close, right? So when the lender has approved the loan, right? When the lender has approved the loan and the insurance policy is secured, then they are going to email the buyer the closing disclosures, and you, as the buyer agent, you'll also receive a copy of the closing disclosures. Now, the closing disclosure looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and open up a closing disclosure to show it to you. All right, let me share that screen with you. Now, this is a closing disclosure from a few years ago. It's about 4 years ago, right? 2021. And basically, it's going to be the lender going over all the details. This is not the closing statement, right? This is not yet from the title company. This is just a closing disclosure from the lender. Okay, so this is details of the loan. This is a 30-year FHA loan. The loan amount in this case was 409,543. Obviously, guys, I went ahead and I covered up the address of the property buyers for privacy purposes. I did forget to cover the seller, but that's okay. And the lender here was Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage. All right. Back in 2021, the interest rate, look at that, 2.75%. You know, I don't think we're ever going to see that again. Wishful thinking if we do, right? The monthly principal and interest here is 1,671 with 93 cents. Obviously, you're going to look here. There's a mortgage insurance of 265 plus the estimated escrow, which is for taxes and insurance, leaving the monthly mortgage payment at $2,589 with 36 cents. All right. Now, guys, this, of course, your buyer is going to need to approve this and digitally sign this, right? They're going to receive the closing disclosures and they're going to have to sign it. All right. So it talks here about the estimated taxes, insurance, and assessments, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and HOA dues. All right. For a total of $801 a month. That is how much money is being collected in escrow. And then the closing cost, the estimated closing cost on this was $25,489. This includes 15,783 in loan costs. All right. 9705 in other costs. All right. So that's strictly just coming from the lender. All right. And then the estimated closing or cash to close is roughly $37,000, as you can see there. Now you'll see what the actual closing cash to close is on the closing statement. All right, so here it goes over some of the fees, the appraisal fee, the loan origination fee. This is what the lender is making on this loan, $4,000. All right, so eyes, always look at that. Make sure that that is correct. If it's not correct, if your buyer doesn't agree, we need to discuss that with the lender. All right. Then there's the appraisal fee of 570. There's the credit report fee and other fees as you can see here. Since this was an FHA loan and it was less than 80%, sorry, less than 20% down, then you're looking at upfront mortgage insurance premium of 7,043. This is why the closing cost was so much, right? There's an additional $7,000 that was added to the closing cost because they went in with about 5% down, I believe. All right, so we have other fees as you can see here. Take a look here. This is the title policy. Guys, in a closing, when you represent the buyer usually pays for title policy. If for some reason, if for some reason the seller chooses the title company, right, and the buyer goes with the seller's title company, then in Miami-Dade and Broward County, uh, it could happen where the seller pays for title insurance. So if you're representing the seller, just let the buyer choose their own title company like that. The buyer pays for title insurance. All right. If you're representing the seller and you absolutely must close with your seller's attorney, then chances are that you will have to pay for title insurance. There is a section on the contract where you will select whether seller or buyer will pay for title insurance. All right, and then this is what the title company themselves are going to be charging The buyer for their services, $795. So if you use our title company, Marina Title, they're charging $795 for buyers and $895 for sellers. All right, taking a look over here, there's the total loan cost. This is obviously part of the loan and other fees that you see here. So basically, oh, and here's the commissions, right? Commissions paid to each agency, Keller Williams and the other brokerage right there. All right, so all of this are numbers that your buyer may be a little confused. You want to make sure that you sit down with your buyer and go over some of these numbers so it all makes sense. All right, and then of course at the end of the day, it's gonna go over everything in detail. All right, so right here we have the sale of the property, right? The closing costs in cash, and we have over here taxes to Miami-Dade County. And right here we have deposit amount was $5,000, the loan amount was 409,000, and all this information. Guys, please go over this with your buyer, make sure they understand. Okay, and then the final closing disclosure, which is this same identical one, is going to be sent over to your buyer with e-signatures, right? Where they're going to sign and approve the closing disclosure. All right, so let's go ahead and stop sharing that one and let's go to the next file, which is going to be the closing statement. So right before closing, the day before, you're probably going to receive a copy, which is a preliminary HUD statement. And that preliminary HUD statement is the identical copy that the seller and buyer are going to sign at closing, right? So basically, you have an opportunity to just review the numbers one last time before you actually go to close. And this is known as the OTA settlement statement, which is a HUD statement. OTA is abbreviated for American Land Title Association, and you're going to receive a copy. Whether this is a finance deal or a cash deal, you're going to receive some type of closing statement. All right, so again, I've gone ahead and hidden some of the information like the property address, buyer and seller. And let's take a quick look here. There's two columns, or there's four columns really, but there's two sides to your closing statement. Normally, you'll see seller right here on the left, and you'll see buyer on the right. You're going to see debit, which is whatever the seller has to pay, and you're going to see credit, whatever the credit, whatever the seller is going to get paid in credit. And same thing for the buyer. Buyer is what debit, whatever they have to pay, and then whatever credits the buyer are getting. So make sure that we go over this and we keep a good eye out for our buyer and their expenses or the seller and their expenses. So let's just do a quick review of the HUD statement or closing statement. Right here we have the purchase price 427,500. The buyer did come in with a $5,000 deposit, right? Deposit that's in escrow. And the financing here is 409,543. All right, there is a lender credit here of $5.65. Great for the buyer. You got a $5 credit. All right. And then here are the HOA dues from April 28th, 2021, which is the day that this property closed, until April 30th of 2021. There is a $15 debit, right, that the buyer needs to pay in order to make the association fees for that month. And then right over here, we have non-ad valorem from the taxes of April 28th through September 30th, 2021 of 206. County taxes. All right, county taxes. Check out this line. County taxes from January 1st through April 27th, 2021. The seller paid $1,319.43, right? The buyer is credited that exact same amount. So the taxes are the buyer's responsibility beginning on the closing date. The closing date was April 28th, 2021. Okay? So you will see taxes later on this sheet. And then right here we have the loan origination fee. Remember that fee that the buyer needs to pay Rocket Mortgage or Quicken Loans, $4,000. Right? There's interest here. There's the appraisal fee. There's the credit reporting fee. All the other fees. There's the mortgage insurance premium of 7,000. Guys, if your buyer can buy with 80%, then by all means, please go ahead and do that. And if they don't need FHA, if they can go conventional, you're going to be saving a little bit of money at closing for sure. All right, so remember I told you about taxes. All right, so the HOA, homeowners insurance, 3 months at $283.75. So your buyer's gonna prepay the HOA for the next 3 months at $851.25. Then right here, sorry, that's not HOA, that's homeowners insurance, 3 months. 3 months of homeowners insurance of 851.25. Your buyer's also going to prepay for taxes for the remaining months of the year. So May, June, July, all the way through December, the total amount for closing prepaid is almost $3,000. There's also flood insurance in this area. So they paid 3 months of flood insurance at $294. All right, there was a small little adjustment, not small actually, a nice little adjustment here of $1,840. All right. And then right here we have all the closing fees. All right, here's the title insurance, right? The 2001 $123. Here's some recording fees. All right, and then here's the homeowners insurance premium to citizens, $3,405. So when your buyer is purchasing a property, they are going to prepay their homeowners insurance. They're also going to prepay their taxes until the end of the year. All right. So that brings the total debit from 427.5 up to 452,317, and cash due at closing is 36,449.84. That is, of course, cash to close, and they're already taking into account the $5,000 deposit they made. Now, if you are representing the seller, take a look here on the left-hand side, seller. All right. The commissions. Make sure the commissions are correct, that the commissions are going to the brokerages. So in this case, there was commission of $10,687 paid to Keller Williams and the same amount paid to the other brokerage. If you are the buyer agent, make sure that you review your commission and that you are getting paid uh, what was agreed on in the compensation agreement. If you have a buyer broker agreement and your buyer's also paying you compensation, then there should be another line here that says the additional commission being paid to our brokerage, and that's coming from the buyer, right? So it'll be over here on the right-hand side. It'll be over here under debit, and you should see under debit, let's say the buyer is gonna fill in $4,000 more in compensation, it should be there. Just make sure everything is there. Make sure that the transaction fees for our brokerage are also inside of the OTA, all right? Because this is going to then be signed by both buyer and seller, and the property is going to close, right? The property is going to close. So we want to make sure that this is correct. If it's not correct, if an adjustment needs to be made, then let's go ahead and request for the adjustment to be made. So when we do get to the closing, we can have a successful closing. All right, any questions on the HUD Alta statement? All right, the Alta HUD statement, it's got so many names, right? Closing statement, HUD, Alta. All right, guys. So let me go ahead and close that one out. And I do want to open now the walkthrough inspection. Just like in rentals, we also have a walkthrough inspection, same form. And we are going to perform a walkthrough on the property. either the morning of the closing or on the evening before, right? The day before. You want to make sure that you go with your buyer and that everything in the property is in good conditions, right? That uh, the tenants that live there, or if for some reason something happened to the property and it was destroyed, we don't want to be walking into a surprise. So schedule your walkthrough for the day before in the evening or the morning of your closing. Go do a walkthrough, make sure the AC works, make sure the hot water works, make sure that, the stove works and everything else, washer and dryer, make sure it all works. Make sure there are no dents on the walls, that the doors open and close, that the windows open and close. And you want to fill in the walkthrough inspection form. Obviously, in this case, if you are representing the buyer, you're going to put in your buyer's name there. You're going to put the seller's name here as well. The address of the property, the items that were inspected. If anything fails inspection, right? If anything is not working at the moment and it's supposed to be working, then you guys can put it in here and have your buyer sign it down below. And then you want to make sure that you submit this to us, to our transaction coordinator, and you want to copy me while you're closing out this file. It's important that we receive the walkthrough inspection form when you're closing out the file. Okay. Now, guys, what happens in a walkthrough inspection if you get there and all of a sudden there is no washer and no dryer, right? When you were buying the property and you did the inspection of the property, there was a brand new washer and dryer in there. It is included in the sale of the property. You get there and there are some appliances missing. All right. Obviously, we may have to extend the closing a little bit, or we're going to reach out to the seller and say, hey, what happened to the washer and dryer? Right? A part of this is that a washer and dryer needs to be present, right? It's part of the deal. So they have to replace this washer and dryer. A simple addendum could be made saying, we agreed to close on the property on the closing date, right? We to proceed with closing. However, the seller must either credit the buyer at closing for the washer and dryer that is now missing, or the seller agrees to pay for a washer and dryer. All right. So inspection, walkthrough inspection, you want to make sure that everything is correct, everything is in mint condition, and we can go to closing. If there's something wrong, you can still close on time, but you want to have an addendum that allows, it allows for correction of whatever's missing or whatever needs to be fixed to be paid at closing or to be replaced after. That's fine as well. All right. Guys, sometimes we close on a property and the seller, all right, the seller needs to occupy the property for, let's say, a month, right? Well, that's called post occupancy. And there is a form for that. And I'm going to go ahead and show it to you here. I'm going to go and open up Form Simplicity. And you guys want to go to the blank forms and on the search, we're going to go ahead and put in post. We're just going to spell the word post. And right here, post closing occupancy by seller. Let's go ahead and open that. So the seller is selling the property, but they cannot fully move out until 30 days after. Why? Because maybe, they need for the finances to come through and they just cannot move just yet. Or maybe they are closing out some business and they cannot move yet. And they have communicated this to the buyers, and the buyers agreed to let them stay at the property for 30 days. So during the contract, you guys want to create this form. You want to go and you want to do the post occupancy form. It will be initialed by both buyers and sellers. All right. And then it says this contract is contingent upon the buyer and seller within blank days. And if you leave it in blank, it's 10 days prior to closing. So if closing is scheduled for October 15th, then this contract or this addendum here needs to be filled in and agreed upon by October 5th, right? 10 days prior to closing. All right, where we're going to deliver the following terms. The following terms is for seller to remain in possession of the property until, all right, and then you're going to put in the date that the seller needs to occupy the property. And if the seller is going to pay any type of rent to the buyer, then, right here it says the post-closing agreement shall provide the seller, shall provide that the seller shall pay a monthly rent of whatever the agreed amount is. If for some reason they're doing it for $0, then I'll talk to you about that shortly. But if they agree to pay 3,000 a month, then put in 3,000 a month, and then that's it. Have both parties initial it. This needs to be in place. The title company needs to see this as well. Now, if for some reason they're going to occupy the property and the buyer wants to collect or at least wants to secure that the seller leaves by that date, then there could be an escrow holdback. What I mean by this is that if the seller is going to make $200,000 at closing, cash, after their loan is paid off and everything is paid off, right? They're going to receive $200,000 cash and they want to remain at the property for 30 days, then you can do an escrow holdback. So the buyer can request that, say, $10,000 gets put into an escrow account and be held until the seller moves out. So there is incentives, right, for the seller to move out by that date or risk losing the $10,000 that's in escrow. All right, that's another way to secure, right? If your buyer wants to secure that the seller leaves on time, then you can request for an escrow holdback that the seller will forfeit if they do not move out within that said time. And that could be done with a blank addendum as well, right? You could do it with a blank addendum. Basically, come over here to Form Simplicity, open up the addendum to contract and write it out. Write it out where the seller is going to deposit $10,000 into an escrow account held by the title company until they vacate the property. All right. Any questions on that one? You guys have been pretty quiet. I hope that you guys are picking this up, taking notes for your next closing.
You're actually here.
I
Very interesting.
Yeah, some of you have already been through closing, so you know how this works, but some of you have not. So it's a good reminder on to what to do, right, when you're approaching closing. All right, so the next part, which is pretty much the last part, is going to be internal stuff, right? You go to your closing. Now, do you have to go to closing as the buyer agent or as a seller agent? You absolutely do not, right? The seller signs first, or they can sign second. It really doesn't matter the order, but usually the seller signs first. The seller is going to sign first, either at the title company or a mobile notary will be sent to them, and they can go ahead and sign the closing documents. If a mobile notary is sent to them, then of course that's going to be charged to them on the closing, right? So that whatever the cost is for the mobile notary is going to be deducted from the seller proceeds. And then the buyer goes to closing and the buyer will sign. Once again, do you have to be there for your buyer? No, you do not have to be there for your buyer, right? If this is a financed deal, then they need to go to the title company and they need to sign all of the loan documents from the lender and all of the closing documents prepared by the seller. Sorry, by the title company. Okay. It needs to be witnessed because there's going to be a lot of loan documents. If this is a cash deal, then the buyer could actually sign electronically, right? Because there's no loan process here, right? There's no lenders. There's no insurance on the property either. Maybe they don't take out insurance, they're doing it in a cash deal. Then a closing on a cash deal, the buyer could simply request to have the closing document sent to them via email and they can e-sign the closing documents. All right. That would be not a problem. So once again, you do not have to be there with your buyer at closing or seller. However, if you want to, you most definitely can, right? Like that, you can take that picture, with the just closed sign and the keys and everything, right? So you go to the closing is done. Make sure that you tell the title company how we're gonna get paid. If you're using our title company, they can overnight the check to our office, our Miami Beach office. They can overnight the check, or they can hand deliver the check to you while you're at the office, and then you bring it to us, or they can wire it to our operating account, right? Give them our wiring instructions. If you do not have our wiring instructions, please reach out to me and I will give you the wiring instructions. All right. So either the wire fee is $15. So $15 will come out of your commission if they wire it. But wiring pretty much is immediate, right? The moment the money gets funded, it's already in our account. Um, Otherwise, you can just go with an overnight check. That's fine as well. All right, overnight mail. Now it's time for you to prepare the documents that you need to send over to our transaction coordinator. All right, so let me go ahead and open up that last document. You guys are probably familiar with this document. This is the disbursement form, and this is what it looks like. It's the same disbursement form for a rental. It just has a different section, and it's for a sale. All right, so you will need the contract, right? The actual purchase contract. You will need the fully signed Ulta closing statement. You're going to need that as well. You will need the walkthrough inspection form, and you will need a disbursement form. Right here on the disbursement form, you're going to write your name. You're going to write the property address. Was this a lead given to you by our brokerage? Yes or no? Is this a sales transaction or a rental transaction? You're going to place an X for sales transaction. And then the amount paid to our brokerage. So if the commission is $10,000, then you're going to write $10,000. If the transaction broker fee of 495 was also paid to us and the total amount on the Ulta statement, right, that closing statement, the total amount is $10,495, then you're going to write here 10,495. This is not your commission split. We are going to pay you based on your current commission split. So right here, you write 10,495. That's the total amount compensation received by Elite. How was this compensation sent to us? Was it wired to our operating account? All right, was it sent to us by mail? Did you leave it at one of our offices? If you collected the check in person and you're going to drop it off at our Miami Beach office, you will select left at the office and put an X for Miami Beach or an X for Coral Gables, one or the other. Okay. Did you collect a broker fee? Yes or no? So if it's 10,495 because you collected the broker fee, you're going to write yes, you collected the broker fee and the amount is $495. All right, that broker fee, you don't have to collect it from your buyer. Let's say you are going to pay for it, right? You're going to deduct it from your commission. Then you're going to say, no, the broker fee was not collected, and it will automatically be deducted from your commission. This section here is for rentals. For a lot of you who have worked rentals before, you're very familiar with that. And then we drop here to sales. All right. Did you give any contribution to the seller or buyer? As an agent, did you have to give from your commission to either buyer and seller in order to make the deal work? Yes, and then put in how much. Let's say you contributed $1,000, then you're going to put in yes, and then write $1,000. No, and you just move forward. Did you use our title company? Right. So if you did use Marina Title, then you're going to say, yes, I used Marina Title and I used them for my buyer. Right. If both seller and buyer used Marina Title, then you're going to write both. All right. Are you working together with a mentor? So here at Elite, we have several agents who serve as mentors. I serve as a mentor. And then if you are working with me or another mentor, then you're going to write yes and write the name of the person. If you are not working with a mentor or you're no longer working with a mentor, then you're going to write no. Okay. And then, are you part of an ambassador program? So that means, did some other agent in our office recruit you to our office? Uh, you know, were you brought to our office from another agent, another colleague? If yes, then write the name of that person. If no, then just go ahead and hit no. All right. Lastly, you're going to go ahead and sign it, date it, and this is another form that you will need to submit to our transaction coordinator, and always copy me as well via email in order to get your compensation paid and for us to close out the file. All right. Send an email to transaction coordinator, copy me. You need again the purchase agreement. You need the OTA statement, which is the closing documents, right? The closing statement. You will need a disbursement form and you will need the walkthrough inspection form. And you will then properly close out the file. If you are the buyer agent, make sure that we let the seller agent know of our license number so they can properly close out the listing in the MLS. Let me show you real quick here. All right, so let's go here to one of my recent closings, all right, where I was the buyer agent. So this is a property I closed last week, and I was the buyer agent, and the listing agent went ahead and put in me as the selling agent. Right? So I am the selling agent. Make sure that you make aware, right? So the listing agent of your license number so they can go ahead and do it. Most agents know how to look up license numbers, but let's make it easier for them. And let's do that. And then, of course, if you are the listing agent, you would then want to close out the listing same way, right? You are the listing agent, and who brought you a buyer? And that would be the agent who brought me the buyer. And I give them credit as well on the MLS. All right, guys. So that is your pretty much final step. If you are the listing agent, close out your listing, right? Closed, put in the price when it closed, and who brought you the buyer agent. And of course, if you are the buyer agent, then make sure you remind the listing agent of your license number so they can properly close out the listing. All right, folks, any questions in what we just went through? All right. Don't forget to ask for reviews, right? Don't forget to ask for reviews. You guys can go to Rate My Agent. Rate My Agent is an excellent service that is given to us through the association. Create yourself a Rate My Agent profile and you can ask for reviews there, or simply if you already have a realtor.com account, you can invite your buyer to leave you a positive review on realtor.com. If you sold the property, right? If you were the listing agent, same thing, have your sellers give you a positive review and start marketing the fact that you closed a property in that neighborhood. If you are interested in continuing to do business in that neighborhood, do door hangers, do mailers, make sure that you alert the neighborhood that this property just closed. You want to pick up business. You want to take advantage while it's hot, basically. All right. Any questions in everything we just went through?
Yes, Robert. With regards to the documents of the transaction coordinator, you mentioned the disbursement form, the walkthrough inspection, the alter statement, and there's something else that I
A
missed.
purchase agreement. They just want
Thank
to be,
you.
they want to, I'm sure you've probably already sent them the contract. because we want you to, once you're under contract, we want you to send us the contract, but I still do it, right? I still send the purchase agreement with my final email. So they have everything. So they don't have to go look for it. Yep. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Donna. Guys, when in doubt, always call me. All right, I'm available. I'm available to help you through this, okay? Victoria, Crystal, Donna, Fabiola, Kenneth, Michelle, Peter, any other questions?
No questions.
Awesome.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, guys.
No,
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
Robert.
much. Yep. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
joining the
training.
training. Remember, we have another training on Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. And then we do have another broker presentation this week on Friday at 2 p.m. You guys, those are a lot of fun, informative, and you get to always network with our colleagues. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Welcome. All right. Bye now.
Bye.